Today at shopdap.com, we're going to be talking about how to do a vehicle inspection on a B8.5 S4. Okay, so before we go into our video of us inspecting this car, I just want to give you a brief summary around it. This is our new project car that we've purchased specifically for showing you videos just like this one, which includes this video, potential repair, maintenance videos, and then also some modification to this car along the way of improving the performance of this car. So make sure you subscribe and stay tuned for that stuff. But with that said, let's talk about this car. This car was purchased from out of state. It is a northern vehicle. It's from the DC metro area. In North Carolina, we don't get a lot of snow here, or at least in this part. It's very uncommon. So this is a northern car, so it's more likely to have some rust. Not particularly old, so I wouldn't expect it to be rusty, but I would expect to see some rust on components that if it were from here, we wouldn't have that on vehicles. It is a super high mileage car. We purchased it specifically for that reason. It's 124,000 miles on it. On a 2014 car, obviously that means that whoever owned this car was racking up the miles. So with that said, we're gonna go through inspecting the car. This car is extremely nice for the amount of miles that are on the car. It looks like a very new vehicle. I would have guessed if you just looked at by the interior and exterior of the car, it may have had like 30 to 40,000 on it, probably at most. But this car was probably very meticulously maintained by whoever owned it and probably put a lot of highway miles, either some type of outside sales job or something like that. So with that said, let's go into inspecting this car. Okay, so anytime you're buying a used car or looking at a vehicle kind of for an inspection of what needs to be done to the vehicle, tires are always going to be a great place to start with the vehicle. You can see that this car basically has brand new tires on it. They may have been either traded that way or it was reconditioned, meaning that the used car place that we purchased it from had already had these tires put on. I don't know which one it is. I believe actually they did not do anything to this vehicle. So tires are good on this, although we did get a tire pressure light on this car. We drove it down from DC and it drove great. The only thing that was a couple days later, we did get a tire pressure light. So either we have a leak somewhere along these tires or something is either low with one of the tires. So we're actually going to have a separate video specifically about tire pressure monitoring on this car that we will link to in the description where you can check that out. Now the other thing on a lot of Audi models is control arms. Now as these cars get aged, because they have these 4-link suspensions, all these control arms tend to wear because they have these joints here. These are better suspensions for a lot of reasons, but because they have a bunch more components, they do tend to have more issues. So what you're going to want to do is test drive the vehicle, make sure you don't have any noise coming from your suspension. If you do, then you would look at those. And then also you can do kind of a side to side like this and see if they have any play. If you do this way, you would see kind of some movement here, and you can also do up and down here. And this is going to tell you wheel bearing, and then you can also potentially see control arms move if you have excessive play there. And then you have these up here, and then you have the ones at the bottom. Now that we have our wheel off, we can take a look at our brake caliper assembly here, caliper carrier, and then here's our pads. This is your backing material, here's your pad material. You can see here that this is not particularly a ton of pad left on there. The inside pad will be worn more than the outside pad, so you will want to take a look there. If you look through the caliper on the back end, back here, you can actually see the pad material on the inside as well. Hard to get on a camera angle, but this is where you would look for that information. All right, as we look at our control arms here, we have these two upper control arms. This is going to be your upper driver side front control arm. This is going to be your upper driver side rear control arm. And then you have your inner part here. Now, you have two issues that can potentially happen. Is these joints, these ball joints here, get loose, which you would then get play. You can usually turn it to allow maybe some rocking there, which would illustrate that. But then you also have the inner parts here that can actually get loose as well. Now, these are not loose, but you can see, and I'm not sure how well we're going to be able to show this on camera, but you can actually see part of this bushing here. The inner side is actually cracking, and that's true for this one as well as this one. Now, part of the reason this car may have been gotten rid of was because of it needs upper control arms potentially in the future, as well as brakes and maybe some other things. So oftentimes when you're buying a car with this much mileage on it, there's a good chance that there's a reason why people are getting rid of it, and it's because they're scared of what's to come. Okay, now that we looked at those upper ones, we can look at our lower ones. Here's our tie rod here. You could have some play in the end here, and then you're looking to make sure these boots here are not cracked. Same goes for, this is your other lower control arm, driver side front control arm in the lower, and then here's your ball joint here. And then also there is a rear control arm as well, which you're gonna be looking at this bushing here, which is where your shock assembly attaches to here and mounts in place. There's a bushing here. You're checking that to make sure there's no wear. There's also an inner one right here where you're gonna be checking for the same kind of wear. And then here's our sway bar, and we can kind of give it a little tug. You have your sway bar assembly, and then you have your sway bar link here and here, which can potentially give you some play as well. That those both feel pretty good. Now just going to our backside real quickly. This is that rear control arm we're talking about. Big bushing here, another joint here, this as well. You're looking for dry rotting of this boot here, and then any play that could be in there as well. Again, you can kind of rock it back and forth, but generally you're not going to get a lot of visual. If you can see the play in these joints, they're super bad and you should replace them immediately. Then we can take a look at our CV boot here, driver side outer, and then our inner, just to see if we have any grease. It does not appear as though there's any grease here coming out of either of these. Now, as we get to the rear of our vehicle, same deal as the front. We're gonna be checking our brake pads, we're gonna be checking for wear and that type of stuff. We already have our wheel off, as you can see. And you can see, again, like we talked about, there's some rust around here, surface rust, nothing major, but this is normal of what I would expect to find on a car from the Northeast. Let's get into the brake pads a little bit and take a look at some control arms. And this one's a little less easy to see, but you can see here the brake pad material. There is not a ton of meat on these, but there's still life left on both of these pads, but not a ton on either. And much like the front, there's a cutout on the back of the caliper here where you can actually inspect the inner pad. Now, as we look at the rear here, not as much to look at as far as things that are easy to visually inspect. We have our lower control arm here. We can take a look at our bushings, make sure there's no obvious wear there. We have our rear sway bar here that comes across, and then you have this little link here that goes between the two. And then we also have, just something to be aware of, right here you have your headlight level sensor for xenon headlights. Pretty much all Audis are gonna have this because most Audis are gonna have xenons, but this is something that you have to disconnect when you're dealing with suspensions because people often forget to do that, and then as you release everything, it ends up breaking the arm for this sensor. So this is something to be aware of. We are looking now, make sure you have springs or bushings, all that stuff are in place. Same thing with our shock assembly here, and then you want to take a look at your CV boots here as well, outer and then the inner, and nothing really appears to be out of place here. And then you can take a look just to inspect your rear parking brake because it is electromechanical on this car, so it is something that can often be broken because people who service them who are not the dealer may not know how to properly service them because they need to be retracted. So they can break these things. Usually they'll have brake faults when that happens. So, but we will be upgrading the brakes on this car at some point. And so we will be showing a video on retracting that as well in the future. Now, one note I wanted to make is if we take a look here, as we visually inspect the vehicle when we're underneath of it, you can see right here there's some overspray. Now this is an indication that there was some paint work done on this vehicle. So you're going to be looking for any paint work associated with it. Now the Carfax on this car was clean, so it hasn't been an accident, but most likely what happened is this lower part here was all scraped up from people coming out of things that have hard dips, and then so it's all scratched on the lip. Easy to happen even on a stock ride height car, very likely to happen on a lowered car. And so they probably just cleaned it up because it was visually unappealing so that they could sell the car. So that is not a super big surprise here. I think they did mention to me that there was some front bumper work done for scrapes or something like that. So that's where this is likely from, and should be something to take note of. But in this particular case, is not something I'm really worried about. But if you found this in other places, especially structural sheet metal places where you found screws around sheet metal that has overspray like this, it is likely an indication that you have had repair work done and should take note of that. I'm not concerned about body work on bumpers and stuff like that, but when you talk about structural damage, that's a whole different ballgame. Now, as we look here, we have our belly pan. This is blocking pretty much any ability for us to see what's going on under the engine here. So we will need to remove this to take this down. Before we talk about that, just want to quickly note, we only showed obviously one side of inspecting wheels, brakes, and that type of stuff. You will want to do that on both sides before you move on to anything else. But we're going to take this down so we can see what leaks we have, or if any, and then continue to go under the chassis so we can take a look and see if we have anything else we can find there. And like a lot of Audi stuff, these are just these half-turn screws where they don't completely turn all the way. You will want to make sure that this hardware is there. A lot of times oil change places that people take their cars to will lose a lot of this hardware, so a lot of it won't be there. We've already moved some of it, so we should be coming off pretty easy here. Now you can inspect your splash shield after you take it down just to see if you have any major leaks that you should be aware of. This one is mostly just dirty, so I'll just show you real quick that this one is mostly just dirty. There is some kind of damp spots there that we should be aware of. It did rain yesterday, so this could either be from rain or from some kind of leak that's maybe not too significant. So I wouldn't be too concerned with what we got going on there. Okay, so here we are under the vehicle. We can now visually inspect it. I don't see anything too wrong going on here that's obvious. We can take a look at our sway bar here. This is much easier to do than on a lot of the VW cars because you have to drop the subframe on those cars. This appears as though you just unbolt it like you would a rear sway bar, and it's super easy to install. So probably this is a much more likely easy mod on this car than you would find on a lot of the VW cars. As we look underneath here, nothing really appears to be leaking. Right here, this drain plug here, this is your oil pan, and then here is your drain plug. It does appear to be a little bit damp and like it's slightly seeping. And so what I would do is just clean it up, and you will want to make sure it's tight, obviously. And it is, but it does appear to be seeping a little bit. We can just keep an eye on that and re-inspect. We will be doing an oil change on this car, so I'm not super worried about it at this point. And other than that, there's really not anything else that we've got going on here. No leaks. We can inspect belts and stuff like that, but I'm planning to look at a lot of this stuff from the top. But I'd like to go to the bottom first so that we can make sure that if there are any leaks coming down, that they're obvious and we can inspect underneath, find the leak, and then try to locate it once we get up top. All right, now we got this other shield off in the rear here. And all we're looking at really is the bottom of the trans. The trans runs from the front of the engine this direction for your rear of the vehicle. And so we have the lower trans pan here, and then we have our bracing here, and then we have our DSG filter here. This car actually has two filters. There's one filter in here, one filter in here. As far as I actually know, the service requirements from Audi, the official ones, are only servicing this small filter here and then the fluid, and this filter actually is not supposed to be replaced at a service interval. Now, you know, obviously we can offer it either way with both of them or without them, but just something to be aware of along the way. We can take a look here. There are no obvious leaks here from any DSG oil, and there is a little bit of grime around this filter. Who knows if this thing was going to be properly serviced or not. You can check Carfax for proper records and stuff like that. Oftentimes they may or may not be there. Last thing we want to really look at, other than just those inspections, here are your downpipes here and here. You can check them for leaks along the way. There are cats up further into the engine. You're not going to be able to see real well, but both this direction there is where the cats are. They go towards the engine. Here are downpipes. Check them for leaks. And we actually do have an exhaust leak that we're about to look at, so you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like. Last thing we're going to do is maybe do a little shifting of there's a bushing right here for the support of the trans here. There are engine mounts on either side of the engine. They do have sensors. I believe these actually do have issues over time depending on how the car is driven. So we will probably look at upgrading them at some point. And then this one also is a drivetrain bushing here. And you can kind of just rock things back and forth and see how much play there is. There's some flex there, but nothing too major. So I wouldn't worry about this. But again, we're going to be looking at upgrading that. Here we are further back. We have these two resonators here, and then we have our exhaust clamp. Now this is where the downpipes actually meet the cat back of the exhaust. We have our two sleeve clamps. Now, They are pretty rusted, which again is something that I would expect for a vehicle from this area. But you can see here, there's clearly an exhaust leak on this car. It's not particularly huge, and what you'll see is either a couple things. This black soot coming out of this clamp right here on the edges, and this white kind of buildup that you'll have, and that's going to be from a lot of the moisture that's coming out of this thing. So there's going to be a slight exhaust leak on this car, probably not even noticeable that I can recall, but it is something that does exist. So these clamps, and I can tell you from what I'm looking at, these clamps have probably been off before, maybe more than once, because the way this flange on this clamp should be straight, and it seems to be kind of mushroomed out a little bit. So maybe this car had an upgraded exhaust at some point and they swapped it back to stock before getting rid of the car. But I can tell you that this clamp definitely has been on and off for some reason. May have been some other repairs or for an exhaust that was swapped out. Okay, so here we are looking at the prop shaft here that comes out of the transmission. Here is the transmission, here is your drive shaft, and we're just checking here for leaks. You can get leaks from this seal that actually drives the drive shaft itself, and so you're going to look here, and then we're also going to look at the one at the front of the differential where the drive shaft meets. You also can try to move the drive shaft a little bit up and down, especially as you get closer, because oftentimes you'll have a carrier bearing where this drive shaft mounts where they'll actually make noise. So we don't have any play there, and we don't have a leak here, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at the rear differential. Now we're looking at our rear diff here, and we're just checking for any leaks along here, along the lines of the backside here or anywhere up here. We don't have any leaks there, so we're good here, and we can move further to the actual differential itself. All right, so here we have our differential. We're checking for leaks and that type of stuff here. Nothing obvious. We do have, this is our pump. For this system, functions a lot like Haldex, but again, we will have a video talking about the torque vectoring diff in the future. But we're looking for leaks. We're checking our axles. Nothing to see here. Everything appears to be okay, and we can continue. Now, the last thing I might consider before we go up top is just take a look at this exhaust. We can kind of just make sure that it doesn't shift around too much, because this car has high mileage. It does appear like all the rubber and everything does seem to be pretty good. And again, high mileage is okay in this instance because it's high mileage, but only in a few years. So let's go up top and take a look there. All right, so here we are under the hood of our S4. 3.0T, they call it 3.0T, I'm not really sure why. 3.0 supercharged V6 engine. These engines are very solid, they're not particularly failure prone. This would be probably, in my opinion, the B8 and B8.5 were probably the two most reliable S models that have come out. The previous generations of S is the 27T, and then the V8 had their share of their own issues. While they were both great in their own rights, reliability was definitely lacking in those cars. So these are really solid engines, not a ton to look at, but we do have a common problems article that we've put together with a certified Audi tech. He worked with us to put that out, so it is a really great article. There are not a ton of major failure prone things, but if you were to have problems, it would probably be one of the things listed there. So I'll make sure we link to that in the description where you can check out that article. Just going along, the only thing I would probably look at would be, you can look at the coils, see if they've been replaced. Ignition coils and plugs are something that should be something that does get replaced at some point during the life of the vehicle. This many miles, I would expect they probably have been replaced. You can look at the part number of the revision. You have to take the electrical connector off and actually look at the top of the coil here where it connects to actually see what the part number would be on the original coils. The most current revision on that right now is an F revision. We do have a DIY actually showing you how to replace spark plugs on a B8 S4. So if you want to take a look at that, we actually do have that video that explains all that in detail. Nothing else really major to look at. I will want to make sure that we don't have any leaks. I did look at the belts. You can kind of look down at the belts from here. If these are really fresh belts, they look like they've probably just been replaced. Other than that, you're looking for leaks. I would say look along things like valve covers here, all on those things. There's a vacuum pump right here. I would look along the seams of the vacuum pump and underneath. These are common to leak on other engines, not these. Places like the valve covers, and then also the covers near the cylinder heads here in the front, and then also at the rear of the engine, there are timing covers here and there where you're going to want to just take a look along those to make sure you don't have any leaks. This engine is actually super clean as far as no leaks or anything like that. We'll want to take a look at your coolant level, make sure that you have a good level there, and then go from there. And you can pop your cover off here just to see if you have anything going on underneath here. This is your supercharger intake manifold together. This is the pulley that drives the supercharger here, which again, we'll have DIY coming because we'll be upgrading the pulley as well at some point in the future. Okay, now that we've done our visual inspections of the vehicle, we want to do the scanning of the system to ensure that everything in the vehicle is actually okay. Visual inspections won't necessarily tell you the whole story, so we want to make sure we scan it with a VW specific scan tool or VW and Audi specific scan tool. That would be either VAGCOM or OBDeleven are going to be the two that are going to get you the information that's specific to your vehicle. So we have our OBDeleven plugged into the dashboard and we are connected to our Android device. If you're not familiar with what OBDeleven is, we will link to that in the description where you can check out more information on that. But we're going to start our scan. So we're going to start scanning the control modules, and it says 1 of 25. It's going to run through them all now. Okay, so now we're finished scanning all our control modules. It says 5 problems on the top right. As you saw, they're kind of clicked off as they found them. 4 faulty control units, so 5 faults in 4 different control modules. You can hold that to clear all the faults, but we want to inspect actually what's going on. So we're going to go into our control modules, that button on the bottom right, and if you look along the right-hand side, you'll see all the control modules listed, and you have green. The number circled in green is good. The number circled in red actually has a fault in the control module. So we're going to go into the brakes here, and we're going to go into faults and tire pressure warning. So we know we had a tire pressure warning issue with this car, which we're going to be covering in a later video. So we are good there. We can go back and back again. We can go to Kessie, go to faults, and lower limit key not reached. These may be remnants of maybe a battery issue around the key. This keys for this car don't have any issues that we've found, so I wouldn't worry about that one. What I would do in that circumstance is just erase it and then test the keys accordingly. Gateway, faults, optical data bus, open circuit. That would be an issue where, well, I would suggest in this circumstance, you would clear the fault and see if it comes back. If you have an open circuit in the optical data bus, it's probably going to cause problems. I'm not aware of any problems that would that are happening that I would attribute to that. And information control unit, faults, optical data bus, unauthorized awakening request. So there may be some communication issue between the MMI unit and the optical data bus. I would possibly look into see if there's some concerns there, but because there are no functionality concerns with this car, I'm not really particularly concerned with any of these faults. None of them are really a major concern for me, so I'm going to clear it. And we are all set there. So we have gone through obviously and checked everything with our OBDeleven, and we can see what other options we have as far as customization and coding with OBDeleven. But as far as the rest of the vehicle inspection is concerned, I'm not going to go through showing you how to check switches to make sure they work and peeling and different things to make sure functionality. You will want to make sure that anytime you're looking at a car like this, you have functionality of all the components inside the car, and you test drive the car to make sure that you have no clunks or noises or shifting issues or anything like that around your transmission, because those things will come back and bite you as later issues. So you will want to check functionality and stuff like that. What we're showing you is an overview of how you visually inspect the car, not test driving. So you will want to go through, check that stuff. You don't need me to show you actually how to look to make sure your shifter boot isn't torn or your switch actually works. So Hopefully this video was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to tune in for more videos on this B8.5 S4. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it.